We'll move on to 6.1, the adoption of the 2025-2026 district calendar.
Very good. So Mr. Polk is coming to present this, and members of the team, I think Mr. Spradlin is joining also for this. Thank you. And I just want to share by way of introduction how much I appreciate that this 2025-26 calendar. I want to share 4 things in brief introduction. One, it is the result of collaboration. And you will hear the names of those who've served on the calendar committee. And I just want to thank that team. There is never anything easy about developing a school calendar because whatever adjustment is made, we most likely will result in someone not being thrilled. And yet, through collaboration, we're bringing a calendar that represents folks on the ground and as well as the needs of our parents, students, parents, and family. I am delighted to share that this calendar represents increased instructional minutes to our critical mission, particularly at elementary school. So that is our critical mission, is teaching and learning and student achievement and growth. We have more minutes with the presentation of this calendar. Thirdly, something I've been seeking in the name of our parents and families is that this calendar aligns, for the most part, elementary, middle, and high school. Some of the parents that I checked in with tonight and others all the time, I have students across the levels, and it's really hard when some are in and some are out of school. So with this work, we're bringing a much more aligned for the days of the school year and the days off. Fourthly, I know it was above 70 degrees. I wasn't out there today, but I heard it was fabulous. And so today's probably not the day you're thinking about it, but we are always thinking about the cushion that will protect us from having to make up days. And I'm proud to share this evening, members, that the cushion is even deeper for this next year calendar, with the sincere hope that if we have a cold winter, a tough winter, we will be okay because the days will be built in. Of course, we never know that for sure, but we are hopeful. So with that, Mr. Polk and Mr. Spradlin are ready to walk us through the calendar, if it sounds all right.
Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to our calendar committee members, Monica Dutcher, learning coach at Hillcrest, Laura Leonard, teacher at Liberty Memorial, Marcia Riggins, teacher at LVS, Emerson Haas-Zales, representing the LEA, Josh Spradlin, teacher at LMCMS, Maria Engelwright from ESC, representing classified staff, Greg Farley, assistant principal at Lawrence High, Gianna Craig Hare at ESC, Megan Epperson, James Polk, J.C. Roberson, and Kristen Ryan at ESC. That's who made up our committee. We met 5 times starting in December of last year. And we are excited to put the calendar forward to you tonight as we work through this as a committee, the multiple variations that we did. This was by far, I think, the one we were most excited about across the board, bringing those things that Dr. Swift kind of highlighted with that aligned pre-K through 12 vision. With the only exceptions being conference days. We have those seniors getting out early in May next year, those increased instructional hours. We're also really excited that we have those snow day cushions. We also, I'm calling them purposeful pauses throughout the school year, but one of our missions was to provide more frequent breaks in our school year for staff and families, to not only take a break from students from school, but our staff also receiving teacher readiness and professional learning throughout the school year. It's a longer winter break. We no longer come back on a Friday and then have to take 2 days off to come back on a Monday, so we'd have that through January 2nd of 2026. We're also looking at moving conferences from March into February, which will give more timely feedback, especially for our secondary students, as we discussed it at negotiations on Thursday. What am I forgetting?
Weather days.
Yeah, so one of the things that we obviously are living right now are those instructional days lost to inclement weather. And so we're really excited that we're going to be building an even larger cushion into next year so that we can withstand even more. And that goes not only increasing our instructional minutes, it also goes hand in hand with adding in inclement weather days throughout the year. So we feel really confident with where we are there and how that's going to continue to support this. So hopefully we don't have to talk about those inclement weather days much more after this.
I would add that, and James mentioned the kind of purposeful pauses. One of the goals that we've had from negotiations, but also in calendar, is trying to have a calendar in which you don't have those stretches where it's 6, 7, 8 weeks without any sort of break. And just in terms of being able to kind of, as a teacher, be able to do some reflection with colleagues and things like that, that maybe the people you don't normally see during a normal team meeting or collaboration time. And so we're really proud that the longest stretch of this calendar is 5 weeks. And then, we've had, again, from a negotiations lens, we've oftentimes have had those stretches where April, where you might have on a Friday more staff that just because of those long stretches take off by giving those pauses in. It's one of those corrections that we had done in April over the last few years. We were able to keep that.
Okay.
And so those were some of the highlights that I think from a negotiations lens, we were proud to be able to keep within this new calendar.
It is frankly the prettiest calendar I've seen in the, in my opinion, in the 7 years that I've been on the board. So thank you for your work, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Questions? Yeah, Shannon, go ahead.
Okay. I really love this calendar. You all did a great job. So traditionally, we're used to seeing something labeled as an inclement weather makeup day on the calendar. Can you talk through, I don't see that in the description, so can you talk through how that's structured for purposes of the day the state forgives if you
Yeah.
do that?
So the way that inclement weather days work is, as a district, we designate certain days throughout the school year as inclement weather days, and every day that we mark as an inclement weather day that we are actually in session, we get that day plus a day forgiven. And so liberty on math, but 1 equals 2. Okay, so what we have done is we've been working with the Department of Education to verify, but we are actually changing our approach on inclement weather days and putting them not front-facing out inside for the public. We're actually putting them into the SO66, the Superintendent's Report, which is a behind-the-scenes support report that we submit to the state every year. And on that report, we'll indicate our 4 inclement weather days next year. So because we've built such a great buffer, we can have up to 4 inclement weather days. And we can place those days anywhere in the course of the school year that we would normally be in session. So in the past, we've put these days in April thinking, oh, we hope we don't have to use them. But what we've gleaned from the state and verified and corrected is we can place those days anywhere over the course of the year, like a Thursday in September when there is no inclement weather on the horizon. And that way, we would be able to count that day as an inclement weather day. So it builds us a buffer on days we know we're going to be in session and not dependent upon what the snow or the forecast might bring.
So I just want to jump in there and say this is a concept that I'm struggling with, and I appreciate the question. We'll continue to learn more about this. It's an adjustment that the state is allowing. And I continue to ask the team to draw me a picture. And as I become more proficient, I will share that with you all. I didn't come ready tonight because it is exactly what James says, but there's still, well, how does that work? It's something that the state allows. And our minutes, we are getting to our minutes and our days, so.
Okay, I really appreciate that. That would be a substantial shift in the way that the State Department is interacting with us on this issue, so I appreciate that. And just knowing that that's that's why we don't see it look the way that it has looked in the past. So thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And then just a nod to our last year conversation about snow days. Can you talk a little bit about how you verify this with the state, what that conversation looks like?
Yes, so we had some leadership members sitting on they do a superintendent's call every Thursday, and we had some leadership members sitting on that call where they had mentioned this initially. And so we continued conversations internally as a district about it, and we're curious before we rush to judgments. And so we did call the State Department, and in fact, the supervisor of that department, and did get them to verify that what they had shared on the call was in fact accurate. And so we feel very confident that we can put this forward with that. But we'll continue to ask questions and make sure that we are doing things the way that we should.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Questions?
I do.
GR, and then I'll go to Ann.
So, for several years, one of the things that we usually hear around this time when we publish a calendar is, when can we get a multi-year calendar? And so with this consolidation, how close do you think, does the calendar committee feel they are closer now to getting a multi-year calendar than they have been in the past?
Yeah, sure. One of the challenges with doing a multi-year calendar in the past is oftentimes there's just a lot of unknowns in terms of the way that some of the language was written in the master agreement about plan days, things like that. So that is a benefit of potentially, if we're able to change some of that language, as we've talked about with increasing plan time. So we're very confident that we can come up with a multi-year calendar approach moving forward. Have we gotten there yet this year? No, but the calendar committee still wants to continue to meet this year and start to work on that.
If I may add, member, I was waiting until after tonight to lean more heavily on them. So, but I feel like this is a great time because there's such good momentum going, and I'm so proud of the work. So,
Fantastic.
So through the negotiations, so the community can understand, through the negotiations process, you might be negotiating things like a second plan time for elementary education. You have to change the language. That gets voted on closer to like June 1. And so the reason why you wouldn't see a second year right now is because that negotiated agreement language is getting cleaned up. Once that is cleaned up, you could foresee in the future, a 2-year calendar, potentially, just as a board member, I would ask potentially 25, 26, what would it be? Actually, it would be 26, 27, 27, 28, yeah.
Just be a 2-year rolling calendar.
So with the charge that we got from Dr. Swift 2 weeks ago, there is, I think I showed kind of a little bit of, there is a lot of language that will have to be reviewed through negotiations in that process, to the point where we're adding some negotiation meetings to look at all of that language and start working on that. So until that process is finalized, and we're able to tentatively agree on what that language is, I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with us starting that process. But again, that's something we're working on. I think that we will get there within the next month or so.
Okay.
It's just that we just haven't had the time since.
Okay, and since there's so
started
much
up.
language change, it's actually quite ambitious. It's possible that we could be back with a 1-year calendar next. That's a possibility, just in terms of controlling expectations.
I would say, yes, it's possible, but I also think that, with the way that we ratify ultimately the negotiated agreement, it's not something that I foresee us necessarily having to wait if
Okay.
that ultimately goes through and is ratified. We might start on what that is in the calendar committee this year, and then ultimately be ready to ratify something, or to approve a calendar for 26, 27 sooner than what we typically have been.
Thank you.
With that, if that helps.
Ann?
Yeah, sorry to kind of circle back, but can I get some clarity on the inclement weather days? So you said there's 4 built in, and for every one that we would be attending, we would get one from the state. So in theory, there are 8 days built in, sort of?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What happens if we have no snow days next year?
Yeah, so the way the inclement weather days work is you have to attend in order to use any of them. So we would want to make sure that the days that we were marking as inclement weather days were days we were for sure going to be in. But then if we don't use them, nothing. We count those as instructional hours and we go on our merry way.
Okay, so
We don't get to cash them back in or anything. Yes,
there,
it's
I
a
just want to
great
be clear
question.
that there's no, like, the April day that we have this year does not exist next year.
Right. It's inward facing. Mhm. Very good.
You had mentioned that we were increasing instructional time. Could you explain how?
Yeah, so one of the things that we talked about at negotiations on Thursday was part of this calendar is also a recommendation to just extend student contact time 5 minutes. And that would allow us for that increased instructional time. So as the negotiations team and the union come together to talk about language changes, that is something that was discussed Thursday and something they'll continue to work through.
Okay. No? Okay. All right.
Anne had my question.
Okay. Anne took Carol's question.
Well, no, because I was just thinking about my nephews who were probably watching this like, okay, what does
Yeah,
that mean we get time off?
And one of the things I want to highlight that you said, when you get that April 21st day that we now have to attend school, that can be a little, I imagine for someone in the district or for a kid, a little heartbreaking to some extent that you lose that. So to your point about every 5 weeks there's a break, something that educators can look toward or that students are going to have a type of break, that might help offset that.
Yeah, so for instance, in this year's calendar, and I forget what day in April it is, but I think it's the third Friday, I think it's a work day for elementary and elementary only. One of the things that we really try to do with aligning is that that day becomes something that all 3 levels, and 4 if you include early childhood, can be able to take advantage of.
Okay.
Which is not something that, like, for instance, this year or even last year, I think we were able to take advantage of.
Okay. I would be interested as a board member in knowing how this calendar impacts the need for substitute teachers. So just to kind of, and I know that's something that HR watches all the time, but it would be interesting to know if it has a positive impact. It sounds like it might, so just to watch that data and compare would be welcomed. I mean, I would like to see that. And then I'm glad for parents that if a high school or middle school kid can be home to take care of an elementary kid, that's available to them with this calendar, which I think is huge. So thank you for doing that. Okay.
Does that mean the start times and end times are aligned? Or how does that work?
We're not there to that detail yet. Would like to be, but we're not. But the day so if
Got it.
elementary's out of school, high school is. I think there's only one remaining that's different, yes, for conferences.
Yeah, high school requires a different amount of time for conferences, so they are actually in session 2 more days than elementary because elementary has that Thursday off each conference week.
For anyone who's had kids go through, elementary typically has the Thursday off as a full day, while middle and high school attend. That is still in this calendar, which equates to the difference in day. That is the only day each semester that is different.
Okay.
One in October, one in February.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I think we've run through discussion. I'm wondering if there's a motion.
I move the Board of Education adopt the district, community, and staff calendars for the 2025-2026 school year.
I second.
Kimball,
Yes.
Byers.
Yes.
Padu Blackwood,
Yes.
Costello,
Yes.
Franklin,
Yes.
Gordon Ross.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0.